So Jill, I know you're a traveler of sorts. God, I hate that fucking turn of phrase, of sorts. People say that. So I'm not gonna say that. Jill, you're kind of a traveler. What's the farthest you've ever traveled solo?
I wouldn't call myself a traveler. I like to go on vacation.
Would you say you're a traveler of sorts?
I guess I go a lot of places. I'd say I don't think I've left the state by myself. I think I've stayed in Michigan. But I've gone up to northern Michigan by myself, and I honestly think that's the only time I've traveled alone. But northern Michigan can be kind of scary by yourself, especially when it's starting to turn to winter. You risk breaking down on the side of the road and not having cell phone service, and you're kind of left at the disposal of the first person to come along who's willing to stop and help you out.
If you think about it, it's always scary to travel. The unfamiliar, the uncertain is always scary. Especially when you're dealing with people you've never met before. That's why tonight, our stories will focus on stranger danger.
Stranger danger!
Don't talk to strangers, people.
Don't look at them. Hide your kids, hide your wives.
Exactly.
Don't know the rest of that bit.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I think something to the effect of they're repping everybody up in here. So tonight we've got 3 stories of stranger danger.
It's enough to make you squirm just at the thought of going back out in public.
Yeah, I found this great subreddit called Let's Not Meet. It's filled with stories of people's bizarre, frightening, insane, and unbelievable encounters with other people on this goddamn planet.
Arguably, I'd say it's even more terrifying than no sleep. I think is just... Everybody should check out this subreddit. I haven't read anything that hasn't made me...
Well, what's the saying? Ghosts I can deal with. It's people that scare me.
Yes, I love that.
Our first story comes to us from Reddit user ArdenArcade. It's a really well-written recollection of a trip she took in South America while studying abroad during college.
So back in 2013, when I was 21 years old, I was studying abroad in South America with my college roommate. I had more than one unsettling encounter while down there, but I am an experienced traveler and generally have good instincts, so I can't say I have any other thrilling stories aside from just barely dodging a few muggings. Other than the general sense of unease that can come with being a solo female traveler, well, a pair of solo female travelers, our 4-month stay was relatively unexciting. Relatively. So at the end of our program, we decided to stay for some extra time and do some casual backpacking. We ended up hiking the Inca Trail. For anyone considering it, it's amazing. And if you're not familiar, you start in one location, which varies depending on the trek that you choose, and you end in a small town near Machu Picchu called Aguascalientes. Your return trip is covered by the hiking company unless you choose to stay. In that case, they'll refund your return trip, and well, Aguascalientes was a new town to us, and our company left immediately after lunch. We wanted to spend the night and get the most out of being in that part of the country. So the time came, and we said farewell to 11 of the 12 hiking companions, and we were joined by one other of our new friends. And they were planning on starting another hike in the morning. Our guides gave us our refund. They gave us very careful instructions on how to get back to Cusco, the city that we originally departed from. The instructions were, when you're ready to leave, make your way to the train station. It's right there. Don't go anywhere else. It's very official, and it's a very safe train. Once you hit the last stop, go to the official bus station, and it'll bring you back to Cusco. So, easy. We understood. We thanked them, and we parted ways. That night, we went out drinking with the remaining member of our hiking party, he didn't drink because he had a grueling hike the next day, but we had a blast and felt safer having a guy with us while we were out. Overall, we made sure to keep our wits about us, and it turned out to be a very fun night without any trouble. We made our way back to the hostel, wished him well on his travels, and then we went to bed. The next day, we have our fun, and then we make our way to the train station. It was really a very nice train, not unlike the ones that I take in the US. It definitely felt safe. The train pulls into the final station, and we begin trying to locate the bus station. We ask a gentleman who clearly works at the stop, and he points us and he tells us to walk about half a mile in one direction, and we wouldn't be able to miss it. We thank him, and we start walking. So, I want to pause here and emphasize that all of these conversations, and the ones that follow, are entirely in Spanish. This isn't too important, but I was speaking a language that I was extremely proficient in, but not fluent. It's not too difficult for native speakers to talk quickly and avoid being understood. We start walking, and we're walking for what actually does not seem like to be enough time, less than half a mile for sure, before coming across a bus station. I'm shocked, to say the least, but I'm also reminding myself that I come from a much nicer part of the world, and I need to put aside my preconceived notions. It had a sign clearly labeling it the bus station, and it says to Cusco right on the sign. And to be clear, it's not a fake sign. It's similar to a sign marking a gas station from a freeway. Big, thick pole, and the actual sign was probably 50 feet in the air. It couldn't have been a temporary trick, otherwise I would have been much more suspicious. Aside from that sign, though, well, it was something all right. The buses were those classic bad news white vans. You know the ones. Again, I check myself. How many people could possibly travel to Cusco in a day here? It wouldn't make sense to have a giant 20-seater bus doing the trek every day. There's a tiny wooden building, what I assume to be an office, underneath this big sign. But we didn't need to go inside. There were two gentlemen standing outside near the vans. We ask them if these are the buses to Cusco. We can clearly read on the sign that they are, and the men confirm. We ask how much tickets cost and when they plan on departing. They give us the price and they say 5 to 10 minutes. They direct us to the van and we sit and wait. We both sit down, and I'll admit it, I was uneasy. Again, I'm an experienced traveler, and I do know not to expect modern luxuries in less developed parts of the world, and there was nothing outwardly sinister about this bus stop, but it just wasn't what I was expecting, even for this area. And my roommate didn't seem to be sharing any of my anxiety, but she's a bit more sheltered and generally trusting, so that's fairly in character for her. I'm also an over-worrier, so between us we were probably both on the more extreme side of the appropriate emotion, me silently freaking out and her a little too relaxed. We wait for over 10 minutes in this van. It's so hot that we've left the door open. We are just talking and swatting flies buzzing in and out of the open door. We aren't exactly on schedule, but I know that they were trying to avoid wasting a tank of gas on 2 passengers, and they're probably waiting for more people. We have an hour's drive ahead of us, and I want to get going, so I decided to go ask. They tell us 5 more minutes. Sure. More time passes, and I can't shake the feeling that we aren't at the right bus station. Nobody made mention of there being more than one in a tiny town, so I kept telling myself I was being irrational. I decided to go see if anybody's in the office, just to get some more information. So I open the door and I walk in without much hesitation. Given its position under the giant sign, well, I walk into what's clearly a residence and 15 sweaty Peruvians cooking beans and looking as shocked to see me as I am to see them. I stammer out is this the bus station? And they look confused and go, oh, the bus? Yes, the bus. Go outside. Talk to the men. Bus to Cusco. And I back out and I apologize for intruding. So I go back to the van to report this experience to my roommate, right as another girl walks up and says, bus to Cusco? She's clearly a native Spanish speaker and not a foreign tourist. The men immediately say yes, but place her in a different van, which makes no sense if they're trying to fill the van that's going to take us to the same place. This skeeves me out more than anything else that's happened yet. So I pop my head in the van and I tell my roommate, hang tight. I walk over to the girl in the other van. She's also waiting alone, and I ask her if she's going to Cusco. She confirms, and I explain that we're going there as well. I'm not sure why they would put us in separate vans. She said she doesn't know, but she looks unconcerned. So I go back to our van and I sit down. At this point, we've probably been there for 30 to 40 minutes. I start expressing my concerns to my roommate, but she's being somewhat dismissive, which I can't blame her for, as I'm a pretty anxious person. She's more used to that than anyone. We get pretty quiet and we just wait, and we're still swatting flies and we're dabbing our brows with our shirts. I'm now sitting quietly with my mind going wild with possibilities. I'm starting to picture some ploy to abduct foreigners or just being murdered, and it's not a good feeling. The flies are really starting to get to me, and I've decided that they're probably hovering around the car because someone was murdered inside, and the blood wasn't cleaned up well enough to fool the flies, and at this point, I'm just torturing myself. The train of thought continues, and I look up, and I see hundreds of flies swarming and crawling on the roof of the van. I realized that we hadn't noticed this because only a few flies would be flying around us at a time. The van was pretty large, and my roommate and I were sitting closer to the front, but the mass grouping of flies was closer to the back. I'm frozen with fear at this point. I'm not sure if this has just confirmed my theory that someone was murdered in the car, or if I'm just letting my imagination run wild, and there are less remarkable things than flies in a South American van. I'm basically hyperventilating. I wish I could emphasize how many flies there were in there. I gesture upwards to my roommate, and she's shocked at what she sees. Right as this happens, the other van with the native girl begins to pull away, and I make a snap-second decision. I launch myself out of our van, and I started to sprint, and I slam my hand on her van to bring it to a stop. She opens the door in shock, and I grab onto the door and I hold it open and I say more forcefully than I thought I had in me, "We are coming with you." I look back at my roommate who was just staring, and I yell, "Grab our bags, run, now." She knew better than to mess with me when I'm in crisis mode. She comes sprinting out of the other van with both backpacks in hand while I keep my hand on the door. These two men come running after her saying, "Don't go, we leave now, we leave for Cusco now," as I shove my friend into the car and scream, "Sorry, we're just riding with our friend here," and I slam the door closed. The native girl, looking unsettled, just tells the driver that we're her friends and to drive. And at this point, I don't know that this driver isn't in on whatever I was afraid of, or even if he was. They didn't plan on messing with a local. Either way, I just saw her as our best bet. We pull out onto the road, and we drive for a few minutes. And then I see the bus station. A very official, legitimate-looking bus station with actual buses, probably about half a mile from the train. I have no doubt that this is where we were supposed to go, and I remember feeling the blood drain from my face. I thought about jumping out of the van and running, but then I wondered, could it be the right bus station? My worst fear is ending up back at the first place without our new local friend. And as we drive, I'm looking for street signs, landmarks, anything to indicate that we were actually headed to Cusco. All I see is wide open desert plains and nothing else. I sat the rest of the drive frozen in fear, collecting a pile of makeshift weapons from what I could find in the back of the van. This included a sharp piece of car, likely from some previous collision, and a smallish fire extinguisher. I told myself that if anyone tried to hurt us, I'd kill them first and figure out how to avoid Peruvian prison second. I spent the entire ride telling myself that I had it in me to kill a person if they tried to harm me. I gripped my weapons until my knuckles turned white, when suddenly the van came to a stop, very much in the middle of nowhere. The driver accepts a phone call, which I can't understand. He then gets off the phone and slowly tells us he just remembered he can't take us all the way to Cusco. The native girl looks concerned. which makes me even more paranoid. And he proceeds to point out a large, desolate building and tells us to go in there and find a ride the rest of the way. Looking back, I'm not sure how I avoided throwing up from anxiety and fear. The three of us walk into the building. I had abandoned my weapons. I couldn't sink them out of the van. The people inside just kept pointing us further and further back until we got to an opening that led us back outside. I wanted to run, to somehow undo the entire journey, but we really had no choice other than to stick with this native girl. We had no alternative methods of transportation, there was no civilization in sight, and honestly, I'm not even sure what part of the country we were in. All I know is we were 60, 90 minutes away from wherever the train had stopped, hopefully in the direction of Cusco. So we ended up getting in another van, this time with the opposite problem. They were insisting that we fit at least 10 people into a 7-seater van. They try to take my backpack, saying that it needs to go on the roof. That backpack has my passport and every resource I would most certainly want in case of an emergency. I'm thinking that they can take it over my dead body, which, as far as I know, might very well be happening. Right as I see my roommate happily passing hers to the lady guiding people into the van. I grab her arm angrily, about to ask what on earth is wrong with her survival instincts, but my face must have said it all. She backs up and tells the lady, "Never mind, she will be keeping her bag with her." The lady looks aggravated and says that they won't fit in the car with all of the people, but we force our way into the van. We sit in the back with our backpacks towering on our laps in front of us. My roommate looked somewhat inconvenienced that I made her do this, but honestly, maybe I was overreacting, but better than underreacting. We drive a long while, but we finally enter the city borders of Cusco. On one hand, I'm relieved because now I know exactly where we are. On the other hand, the surrounding areas outside of the main square are extremely dangerous shanty towns, and we're the only foreigners with giant backpacks on the bus. No sooner am I thinking, well, at least we're close, when the bus driver turns and says he doesn't want to drive further and that we can figure out our own way from there. Even the native girl immediately goes on red alert and offers to pay more if he will take us into the city square. He declines, kicks us out of the bus, and he drives away. We're looking at all the people staring openly at us. And she asks in a scared voice if we'd split a cab with her, and we agree immediately. Problem is, in this part of the world, a cab is often the first car to drive up and assures you that they will take you where you're going. Not very official. And this is exactly what happens. A Corolla from 1993 maybe pulls up and tells us to hop in. Our friend looks wary, but decides it's better than winging it out in the open. He drops us in town square without incident. And at this point, the native girl looks like she's aged 5 years since we've crossed paths with her hours ago, but I'm sure I looked even worse. Really calm, she says, "Well, I'm glad we got here safely." And I can barely talk, I'm so exhausted. And I respond, "Me too, thanks." And we part ways. I had a few incidents on this trip that made me a believer that no matter where you are, one traumatic experience makes wherever the last place you slept feel like home. And let me tell you, the hostel bed felt just like home. This may be an obvious observation, but I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't made the connection until recently. When we hiked the Inca Trail, there were a lot of tourists, and we stayed in Aguascalientes. There were a lot of tourists. And when we took the train, there were a lot of tourists. When we took the buses back to the most touristy city in the country, there weren't any tourists.
And that right there is why people are always hesitant to travel to a foreign country, foreign to them.
First of all, you need to know the place you're traveling, which I feel like the narrator did. I feel like she was very knowledgeable about her travel plans.
She seemed like a seasoned traveler, and yeah, it seemed like she had killer instincts and knew exactly what to do when
Right.
she wasn't feeling right.
The only problem is, and as somebody who also over worries about everything, know the people or person that you're traveling with if you're not traveling solo. I'm sure that she would have had trusted her instincts before even getting in that van and maybe going further down the road and getting to like the real bus stop.
Well, it's like that's what's funny about instincts. Like, she talked about this person they'd been hiking with the whole time. I guess they got to know them, throughout the hike, but staying and going out partying with them late at night. I mean, it's a guy apparently with two, like you said, solo female travelers. She didn't find anything weird about that guy. There was nothing, notable about that experience other than they had fun.
Right, so she's not just over worrying at every situation.
Exactly.
So let's talk about this bus station she decided to stop at with her roommate.
It doesn't sound great.
The second I would have walked into that house, I would have been like, okay, well, we're out of here. Regardless if a native person was sitting in the opposite van, I would have bolted.
Yeah, if you want a sign that says bus station, I can go get you one.
Right, and with, I mean, I guess I'm not very up to date on my current events of that region, but there are employees like that set up, and it's pretty well known that that's kind of a way to abduct tourists.
Right.
I
mean, given you got to give her some credit, you're just walking along and you see bus station. You don't know.
What about the flies? What do you think the flies were all about in the van? Do you think somebody was murdered in there?
So I've never in the wild seen a collection of flies. I found like a dead animal that had started to rot and there were maggots, but there weren't flies everywhere.
What were you doing looking for dead animals?
I was helping a relative garden.
Oh,
and we
gross.
smelled something awful. We're like, it has to be this tree. And then I'm moving some leaves and
okay, we don't need to go any further. Oh,
it was
goodness.
Gross. It had rained earlier, so the fur on it had
I am going to
fallen
vomit.
off, and it was just this bare dead possum. Yeah. But the flies could have been attracted to, some flesh, some remains, some blood.
Well, it's definitely a sign of being close to decay. Like you said, it's just the collection of flies. They don't swarm. I mean, they do swarm, but...
Why that many?
Right, why
and on
that
the
many?
fucking roof?
I know. Just doesn't make sense. So we're curious to know, has anybody else experienced anything similar, any close calls while traveling abroad? We would love to hear and compare and see if maybe you have a similar story.
Well, yeah, while we're talking about sharing stories, I know, Jill, you have a stranger danger road trip tale, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, just to give you guys some background, like Ben said, I do love to go on vacation, and there's nothing I love better than a good road trip with some great friends. And one of the very first road trips that I took right out of high school started out a little shaky. After loading up the SUV, grabbing some fast food for lunch, we hit the road and we started our 22-hour drive to pure party bliss. The trip had been smooth. We stopped a few times to gas up and stretch our legs, but around 3 a.m., Jess, who had been driving all day, was exhausted, and so were the rest of us. We were broke, and we weren't planning on stopping overnight, and we didn't want to really dish out the extra funds to cover a hotel room for a few hours of shut-eye. Jess pulled into a well-lit parking lot of a well-known hotel chain, and she jumped in the back of the truck, and she made a bed right on top of our suitcases. I curled up in a ball behind the driver's seat. Another girl sprawled out across the passenger seat, and then 2 others made themselves comfortable in the back with me. I mean, what could go wrong when 5 college friends hit the open road, heading down to the #1 spring break location in the country, Panama City Beach. It didn't take long for all of us to pass out. just took the keys, so the radio was off and we fell asleep listening to the distant sound of highway traffic. We were parked under this really, really heavy light in a heavily populated area of the parking lot. It was right around the corner from the main lobby entryway, so we figured we'd be safe. But it was only 3 hours later that I felt tapping on the back of my head. I slowly started to drift back into dreamland when I felt the tapping again. It was softer now, so I started to open my eyes, but my head was resting on the window, so my eyes were facing the light that we were parked under. And it was at that time I realized that no one had their feet by my head, so the tapping that I felt was coming from somewhere or someone else. That's when Brittany, who was sitting in the passenger seat, screamed, and we all woke up in a daze. After adjusting our eyes for a few seconds, we could all see a man standing outside of our car. A man that was shouting at us, and he was holding some type of weapon or stick. And the car just erupted with your stereotypical high-pitched screams. And Jess wasted no time. She literally slingshot herself from the hatchback of the driver's seat, keys in hand. And some of us shouted encouragement to Jess to just get the hell out of there, and I'm pretty sure others were just screaming in horror. It took a minute for her to frantically jam the keys in the ignition, and all the time the man was pounding on our windows and yelling at us. He'd moved to the rear of the car, and Jess was scared of hitting him when she pulled out. He wouldn't move, like he was blocking us from leaving. So after a few minutes of frantic maneuvering, Jess was able to unparallel park from the situation. She jetted out of the parking lot at 70 miles per hour. We could see the man growing more distant in her rearview mirror. He did seem to run towards a car parked close to ours, but by the time he would have gotten in his vehicle, we were long gone on 75 on our way to PCB. Logically, this could have been an employee of the hotel, but as our memory serves us, he was not dressed in uniform, and yes, I'm judging a book by its cover. He did have a suspicious appearance. I mean, honestly, who's gonna bang on a car full of girls who are sleeping? It was pretty obvious that we were just taking a break from our drive. But after our terrifying power nap, we only had about 5 hours of driving before we hit our hotel, and yes, we actually reserved a room at this one. But we spent the rest of the road trip looking over our shoulders, wondering if he was following us in his car. I mean, it was probably just a coincidence, but we did keep seeing the same tan sedan with Alabama plates on the same stretch of highway that we were driving. So not as terrifying as the first story that we heard, but in the moment we were super freaked out. I mean, like I said, it could have been an employee. Our imaginations could have been running wild.
Could you just not get a room, or you didn't want to get one?
We didn't want to get one.
You didn't
We're
even check.
broke. We're in college. We're super broke.
I guess that's fair. Yeah, you got to save your money for partying and not.
Those party passes. Room. Those party passes are not cheap, and I want to go to all the fucking phone parties.
Yeah. Okay. I can.
MTV, PCB.
I can sympathize with that. That's fine. And I guess you said it was a well-known hotel chain. You were in a well-lit parking lot. So assuming this was a homeless person, probably either, I'm going to guess, high on narcotics or, goddamn, I don't know what he was trying to do.
I don't know what was in his hand, because we all saw him holding like a long, I want to say like crowbar, but I don't think it was a crowbar, because he could have busted through the window. But he was definitely like, he had something in his hand that he was hitting the car, and I don't know what he wanted, and we did not want to find out.
Oh man, maybe he was trying to like get in there and unlock the door. So you had the window down?
No, the windows weren't down. What do you mean get in there? Do you think that's what the tapping was that I felt? Like he was trying to like jimmy his way in through the window?
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if he got something actually in the window. And that's what you felt on your head.
Oh, this is a revelation. This is scary.
That is scary.
I'm going to have nightmares now. Oh my gosh.
Maybe what you felt was him closing the door and leaving.
then he stood outside the vehicle and woke us up.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I'd like to not think about that. I'm going to put this behind me.
Let's not meet again.
Let's not meet. Somebody add that to Reddit for me. I don't know how to do it.
I think that will be sufficient. This will stand as your Reddit Let's Not Meet submission.
Thank you. Well, at least I wasn't traveling alone, which is more than I can say for this next story that we have to share with you about a solo cross-country... What?
No, I was just going to say this poor... I don't want to say girl, this poor young woman, but I feel weird saying that.
This heroine.
This poor chick.
This poor chick.
Is that derogatory? Can I say that?
I don't know. Honestly, I'm not offended, but then again, girl power.
We've got a story from another courageous Redditor. They've since deleted their account, so we'll never find out who they were.
But we're standing with you, sister.
That's right. Girl power.
Girl power.
That's
I don't know
right.
if anybody's noticed the strong heroism theme that we have going tonight. We're gonna keep it going strong by sharing this Redditor story.
That's right. If you're driving around late at night, desperately looking for a place to stay, and there's that one creepy motel with vacancy, this is a prime example of why you don't stop at that motel in the middle of nowhere.
Years ago, I was by myself, driving across the country. I was on my way to a family reunion, and I planned to stop at a friend's house, but there was horrible weather and the traffic was slow moving. So, after some time, a terrible accident happened just ahead of me, and I was stuck for quite a while. After we started moving again and the weather started to clear up, I was a total of 5 hours behind schedule. I was exhausted. I was in need of a bathroom and a shower. So I pulled into a little strip motel off of a fairly rural state road. It was obviously small and dirty, but it would work in a pinch. There was a window to outside where check-in was. The guy inside eyed me up and down and asked me if I was traveling alone. And at the time I was in my early 20s, and it was hard to tell if this man was just the southern gentleman type or a genuine creep. I went to hand him my ID and my credit card, but he insisted that I pay using cash only. Red flags were definitely going up at this point, but I scrounged together just enough cash and he tossed me a room key. I parked outside the door to my room, and when I got in, it was dirty and small, barely bigger than the bed. The first thing I did, I used the bathroom, and I flipped the mattress. Dirty. Signs of bed bugs. A moment later, I spied a cockroach. That was it. I was out. I decided I could use the parking lot space at least, and I could sleep in the back hatch of my SUV. I curled up using a suitcase for a pillow and some random clothes for blankets, and I fell asleep for an hour. I woke up to a voice outside. It sounded like someone talking on the phone. I glanced out to see the guy from the check-in standing outside, and it was now around 3 a.m. He finished up his call and then walked quietly over to my room, and he unlocked the door and he walked in. The lights didn't turn on, and a minute or two later he came back out, slamming the door behind him and cursing. Get this, with another guy. I hadn't seen the second guy go into my room, and I still don't know where he came from. They angrily talked for a moment, and then the check-in guy started walking over to my SUV. I covered up my head quickly with a shirt, and after he tried the locked door, he peered into the back seat, but between my tinted windows and blending into the general mess, he didn't notice me in the hatch. The two guys walked to the other side of the parking lot. They were talking more, and one was gesturing across the street to where that diner was. While they were distracted, I climbed into the front seat and started up the SUV, and then they turned around in surprise as I pulled away. I called my friends back home and I told them, but I didn't want to worry my family, so I didn't say anything to them. When I got home 3 weeks later, we figured out the name of the hotel, thanks to Google Maps, and I called the local police there. They told me that the place had closed down only days before I called. This all took place about a decade ago. Even though the cops took my information, they never called me back. I wasn't able to find anything about the place and searching around the web immediately afterwards. I don't like to think that I was in any critical danger and that there has to be a logical explanation. But I can't outface the reality of the situation. I was in danger, and those guys were looking for me. Do you think that guy was in the room the entire time that she was sleeping?
She doesn't describe any sort of, door, making me think the rooms were adjoining. So, he must have been.
Under the bed in the closet.
Must have been under the bed.
Oh my gosh. That's why I always look under the bed when I'm in a hotel. I'm not joking. I do.
You look under it? Some hotels you can't.
I know. And you know what? That's good because nobody can be hiding under the bed. But it's bad because there could totally be a body buried in the bed.
Yeah. That body's not going to get you, though.
Pretty obvious that those men were up to no good. I don't know if I could have just hid in the trunk of my car and stood perfectly still.
Yeah, I feel bad that you, paid for that place. And how bad was it that you couldn't just keep going?
She paid for her life.
You had to drive out of there anyway. I mean, if you just would have said, as soon as he was, giving you the creeps and telling you cash only, we can't have any records you ever hear,
Keep going till you find a Holiday Inn.
Oh, yeah. Drive at least another hour until you're into, I guess, what sounds like civilization.
I know. I wonder if you could find that old motel. Just give the location of it.
So in the actual raw post she made to Reddit, she mentions the name of the place, and if you type it in, we'll link to the story on our website. If you type it into Google Maps, it does return a result, and it is in Virginia where she says she was.
And after looking at some of these pictures, I honestly don't know why the hell she stopped there.
Yeah, seriously, I would have driven right by. I would have gone to the gas station nearby and slept there.
It looks like somebody broke into their grandmother's attic and threw all of her tapestries into a room at the Bates Motel.
Yeah, it looks like if somebody heard you needed a place to stay and they were like, yeah, you can stay at I run a funeral home. You can come stay there. We got a bedroom.
We'll have a link to the motel and information on the motel on the website.
And if you have your own stranger danger story, your own let's not meet encounter, let us know about it. You can reach us by email at admin@atthefire.com. You can visit our website to submit your story.
And if you enjoyed this episode, share with your friends. Help us spread our love for all these creepy and crazy tales. And make sure that you rate and review us on all of your favorite podcast streaming sites.
Yeah, that would really help us out a lot. And real quick before we go, gotta give a huge thank you to all the great musicians from freemusicarchive.org that this episode could not have been possible without. We thank you very much for listening. My name is Ben.
And I'm Jill.
Thank you for joining us at the fire.
Girl power.
#yes, queen.
That was so on fleek.
Did I do it?
You did it.
Am I hip now?
You're so hip.
Can
High
I
five.
hip hop?
Hip hop a hip to hippie to the hip hop. But don't stop the. Y'all get it.
Now we have to pay money.
Oh, that was a parody. Bye, everyone.